Pretending without practice is faking. Pretending with practice is training. If I am going to use the language that would be more appropriate to personal development, then training or pretending without practice is wishful thinking, whereas pretending with practice is becoming. I prefer the term training and also faking because it's more appropriate to what is actually happening. And you may be wondering by now, why am I talking about this and what does this mean? My training and practice is as a clinical hypnotist, a metaphysical scientist, a musician, and a martial artist, with a consistent practice in all of those things. Clinical hypnotist simply means that I am a behavioral scientist that specializes in being a belief system enhancer, focusing under the scope of practice being vocational and avocational motivation and self-improvement, which, if you really want to sum it up, I basically am a superpowered life coach with the skills and training that I have from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute, which is the first nationally accredited college of hypnosis in the United States of America. It's been around since 1967. What does it mean to be a metaphysical scientist? For me, it's someone who respects mathematical, experimental, theoretical, and applied physics as a bridge to understanding consciousness and the ultimate nature of reality, which I've determined is eternal, as I've laid out in my eternality axiom. A musician could be self-evident, self-explanatory. My personal practice as a musician, a lot of it is cathartic and self-expression. And the way that I express myself is as a singer, vocalist, lyricist. And I distinguish between singing and vocalizing because I also perform death metal vocals. So singer, vocalist, lyricist. So I write my own lyrics. I'm also a composer and play various instruments, including acoustic guitar, various percussion instruments, and wind instruments. And I would include in being a musician that I am also a dancer, which now bridges into what I do as a martial artist, which one of my favorite ways to practice is through a foundation of capoeira movements, which combines a dance, a fight, and a game. But I have modified it to a very strictly combat and self-defense format, honed from years of street fighting and some in-the-ring competition and other competition, from wrestling to MMA. And focusing on the combative and self-defense and very practical aspects of the movement, which I also specialize in Western boxing and American kickboxing with a touch of Muay Thai and submission wrestling, with an emphasis on freestyle Greco-Roman wrestling and some judo. Okay, so those are my practices. Now, why am I even saying that, and what does that have anything to do with pretending without practice being fake and pretending with practice being training. It's because I'm addressing something that's largely societal in general and has also manifested in very specific things. Societally, in general, how this has manifested is that people are focusing on charisma over character, form over function, superficiality over substance. So, what a lot of people unfortunately are doing in order to keep up with the internet Joneses, all of the influencers and a lot of the fake stuff that's online, is they're also faking. And this is not new to social media or anything. People just have more influence from it to feel that they're not enough and that they have to pretend to be like these other people because it seems like so many other people are living these high lifestyles that they are missing out on somehow because they're not like these influencers and other people that they see. So they join in on the fakeness. But it's always been that way. With people taking shortcuts of all kinds, where instead of healthy eating and exercise and adequate rest, hydration, and things like that, they will opt for surgery and makeup and pills and diets instead of building up real attractive traits and character. They pretend and fake in order to, for various reasons, to get jobs, to attract relationships, romantic and otherwise, instead of actually having substance, instead of having various different talents, instead of being well-rounded, which leads to all kinds of different forms of anxiety and depression and various different types of mood. Let's see, the psychiatrists, I don't know what they call them, mood disorders. And I'm not a psychiatrist. My scope of practice as a clinical hypnotist is vocational and avocational motivation and self-improvement. I've developed synaptic syntax sequencing and personally attuned conversational transformation. From that, in combination with my research into metaphysical sciences and consciousness, and all of these things with martial arts and music. And I mention those things as personal, real-life examples of being well-rounded. And a large part of that comes from the allocation of my resources. Instead of spending money on what people unfortunately call partying, which basically amounts to poisoning yourself and feeling terrible for days on end afterwards, and not having energy and being dissatisfied with your body composition and the way your skin looks and all of these various different ailments and aesthetic things that people complain about, which is self-inflicted. And maybe I'm a mutant in this way, but I somehow seem to have found enjoyment in continuing to do the things I was doing since I was very young. You know, riding my bike, practicing martial arts, climbing trees, jumping and running and climbing and flipping and spinning and swimming, and all of that stuff. Just playing. My body being the main character in a wonderful game of life. And that's why I say that pretending without practice, which a lot of people are doing, unfortunately, is faking, while pretending with practice is training. And one of the main things I'm going to be addressing more and more is how this has been a large part of the unfortunate development of what people have labeled as toxic masculinity, and the identification and amplification of the status of incels, which means involuntary celibates, basically attributed to guys, young men who can't find romantic and sexual partners because people think that they're losers and they feel like they're losers. And what people also look down on as the simp culture, guys who may sometimes themselves also be incels and also express toxic masculinity traits because they're so frustrated, but because they have been sucked into, brainwashed by this culture that surrounds them with this ambiance, this atmosphere. They're immersed in this structure that superficiality over substance, that form over function is the way to go. And this has caused a huge issue with what is known as masculinity and the complaints that men have. And a lot of them are really ridiculous and stupid. And what I've recently learned of where the whole red pill movement came from, which I have already published on a podcast and a video on YouTube of how that term has been grossly misappropriated by these people who are hateful and fit into those other categories of incels, toxic masculinity, and simps masquerading as real men and trying to take back man culture, the whole manosphere. And when it really should represent what it is from physics, which Edwin Hubble talked about how there was, or observed, not talked about, just observed, it's empirical. Anyone can observe this effect if they have the instrumentation or can go someplace that does. Redshift, which shows the expansion of the universe, which the Matrix with the red pill took that and as an analogy for expanding the mind, whereas if the universe were collapsing upon itself in something like a big crunch, it would show blue shifting of the light, which was the blue pill. You can go back into the Matrix. But we have many other people who are actually taking blue pills, who are collapsing into the Matrix, but pretending that they're expanding and escaping the Matrix and taking the red pill. And that's really what the whole red pill movement is a good example of this whole fakery, of this form over function, this superficiality, this pretending without practice. And it's pandemic in the world. And it's one of the reasons why, for example, women who thankfully have been liberated from so many things because of their now increased education, spending power, independence, and liberation overall. I don't know if those things are all feminist traits, but they may be, or feminist movement traits and ideals. But these are all good things for women. And because women now have more of the pick of the litter, they don't have to feel like they're trapped for the most part. A lot of women who are successful in this way. And they have more choice over the partners that they choose. And men will go on the attack and say, oh, women are not feminine anymore. They're acting more masculine like men, all because women are choosing to be independent, not have kids with these guys, choose what sexual partners they want to have, and not putting up with the crap that guys are putting on them and thinking that they have to fall in these roles of being housewives and domesticated. Because it's not necessary. If a woman is making and earning more money and decides that she wants to be the breadwinner, as if her male partner, if the man in the relationship is really a man, they're not going to be feeling insecure about that and just simply pull their weight and make that woman's life better. The roles should be appropriate to how the resources are being earned versus over what the gender is. Because all of those are really archaic ideas about power and control, where a lot of those things with women and marriage and things like that were just simply ways to enforce and create new forms of slavery. Which a lot of people might think that's a bold thing to say, but if you really look very deeply into it, you'll know that this is the truth. The whole idea of women taking men's names and all these other things. When even certain simple things about lineage can be found genetically, with the fact that, for example, women pass on their mitochondrial DNA, exact copies of it, to their children, and only women can pass on an exact lineage that can be traced back through women, and men don't do that. Just an example. I'm not saying that really means that people don't know about a lot of these things. But, hey, you can pretend without practice all you want and be fake. I prefer to be well-rounded and pretend with practice. Meaning, when I want to succeed at something, I use the example of Earl Nightingale, that success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal. And if I'm not experiencing some type of state or of being that I want, then I will pretend that I'm there to see that ideal, but practice to get to that point. And then once I reach it, set a new goal to pretend to get to. I've also created something called the emotional incubation method that goes along with that, and neural subactivation, and how all that puts together. And this is all backed by neuroscience, and it has to do with practicing martial arts and clinical hypnosis and metaphysical philosophy, and even music, rhythm, the power of lyrics and words, and how when pretending with practice is training and becoming. And being well-rounded is the answer to a lot of these societal ills. And as a man, I'm also very keen on a lot of the just ridiculous behavior and developments that have been happening with men, and how people, instead of taking responsibility for what's going on, decide to start blaming others for the problem and becoming violent and attacking and trying to wrest power in these really ridiculous ways. When the solution is, instead of faking, just become well-rounded. Put in the work to be the best that you can possibly be. And you don't have to pretend. It's really so simple. You do not have to pretend. If you are actually really a cool mofo, and you do cool things, you may not be attractive to everyone, but the people who like the things that you do, if there are people who see you who are physically fit and athletic and a martial artist and really dedicate and practice to it, and you're passionate about something, they're going to like that. If they see and hear your music and hear your voice and see that you're playing music and you do it well and you love it and you're passionate about it and you have ideals and goals and objectives that you go to, there are people who are going to be attracted to that. If they see that you like to read and write and study philosophy and are a thinker and maybe attend those like old school thinking salons, which actually I really want to start those, and intellectual salons, and you just really have great conversations, and there are sapiosexuals, people who are attracted to the intelligence. There are people who are attracted to that. There are others who are attracted to so many other aspects, but I just name those because I'm familiar with them. I am a metaphysical, musical martial artist. I love to read, write, and study, play music, and practice martial arts. I'm an author, composer, producer. I love this stuff. I do it, I document it, and I've been doing it for so long, and there's no stopping. And I've just realized, just by looking at the responses that I get socially and in the world, and the kind of opportunities that I have in all different kinds, whether it be professionally or romantically or everything like that, it's so much, I dare I say, easier for me by my default, simply because I really just am actually an interesting person. Because like a young lady I met years ago, who's an actress, her father actually used to do voiceover for the Transformers, Michael Bell. Her name is Ashley. And one day I was talking to her and I said, you know what, you're very interesting. And she says, well, interested is interesting. And maybe that's why some people find me fascinating or interesting. Because I'm interested in things and I pursue them to the end. And I'm simply well-rounded. And I'll leave it on this. This is what's really interesting. Years ago, and it still happens now, people used to make fun of nerds, right? People who were smart. Oh, you're smart, that's funny. And they make fun of them and put them down because they're intimidated by it. Because people feel fear of those things. So they attempt to make themselves feel better because of their own insecurities by putting people who they perceive as smarter than them, they put them down. The same thing happens when people are physically fit and good looking or excel at things. They make fun of them, put them down. People make fun of the fact that you're actually fit and you can squat and you can move your body. They see you doing those things and they laugh like it's funny, it's weird, because they can't do it. They feel inferior. They feel insecure, and so they attempt to put you down to make themselves feel better. They do the same thing if you are talented in some way, musically or otherwise. People will put you down. Meanwhile, living in this strange inner world where they hate themselves because these are the same traits that the celebrities they worship embody. Or at least that's what it seems like. Especially when it comes to like the action heroes and things like that on screen. They're like that. Dare I say, I'm like a real life action hero, being well-rounded as I am. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I can pretty much read almost anything and understand it. I've been writing for over 20 years, much longer than that actually. Playing musical instruments for just as long as well, and practicing martial arts for the same time. And I like it, and I didn't do it just because I thought it was cool and it was going to get the girls, but it just so happens that. But these are the things that people make fun of because of their own insecurities. Why? Because people are pretending without practice. They're faking. And that remains, they become more and more insecure and regretful and resentful as time goes along. So if you want to choose and be in a better path, then practice. Practice, train. Select ideals, make decisions, and do what it takes to grow and be the best that you can, always, and just keep doing that over and over and over again until you die, till you just can't anymore. There's no reason to ever stop being the best that you ever can be, period. I'm Hakeem Ali-Bocas Alexander.